Welcome to episode 18 of On a Mission Mojo podcast. I have a very amazing guest today that has just a fascinating story, a really great mission, and a book that I'm really curious to dive in and learn more about. So I want to introduce Rish Mitra, who is an entrepreneur and ultra runner, change agent, and author of Break Up With Yourself: How to Unmask and Unbecome the Man You Were Told to Be and End the Cycle of Masculine Toxicity. What an important message for that book. So I cannot wait. But I want to first just start by hearing just a little bit about what you feel your mission is in this world.
Oh, yes. First of all, thanks, Laurie, for having me. And
Mm-hmm.
I keep my introduction short, and there's a reason for it. And I'll tell you right after my mission, because I think the purpose of the mission should be the longer introduction. And I
Okay.
am just a force here. So I don't want to take too much time on my introduction. So my mission really is to raise awareness around boys and men and
Mm-hmm.
how uh, this man up culture and boys don't cry culture have created a generation and eras
Mm-hmm.
of our past generation. And not only
Mm-hmm.
that, now we are in the middle of it. And if we don't do anything, our next generation, our kids, would be the another one to suffer.
Yeah.
And my mission is to raise awareness on that and
Mm-hmm.
really bring forth that boys, it's okay for boys to cry. It's okay
Mm-hmm.
for men to be vulnerable, to discuss, because that's where the strength is. Strength is not in like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to communicate about it, I'm not going to express about it.
Right.
Uh, and that's where the strength lies. When you don't do that, that's really not the strength, that's actually the weakness
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to
I
hide.
agree.
So that's my mission.
I love it. I love it. And I know that you have a reason that you're on this mission, a very personal reason. And I would love it if you could just share a little bit about your story, as much as you feel comfortable sharing about why this mission.
Oh, absolutely. And I always talk about start with vulnerability is my superpower,
Hmm.
because that's when I mean it's a learned behavior. I didn't know about that because
Hmm.
I was also grown up. I grew up in a culture where it was frowned upon, especially
Hmm.
for boys, just like any other boys and men around the world. It's just that no one have talked about it. No one wants to come out and really be the voice. And now I'm happy that our generations are seeing a lot of people who are ready to men who are ready to talk.
Hmm.
So my story started. Really, the reason is I was sexually abused when I was 7 years old,
Okay.
and I grew up in Calcutta, India, in
Hmm.
an Indian family. So for us, it's a very hush hush kind of Asian culture
Hmm.
demands that, I guess, in a way that
Yeah.
you're always like try to portray everything right, and
Hmm.
especially the boys and men, they are the providers,
Right.
and so and I actually also realized right around when my son was born in
Hmm.
2017. One day I literally blacked out and no reason whatsoever. And throughout a lot of therapy, counseling, and different modalities, now I came to find out that my whole body is kind of warning me that I'm a father,
Mm.
about the sexual abuse that I kind of put it in the back burner.
Right.
Uh, and in 37 years, that was just a wake up call for me and a lot of confusion around that time. So I
Hmm.
started drinking heavily.
Okay.
Addiction took over to a
Hmm.
point where it was like crazy, because it was not that I wasn't understanding what I'm doing, but as if like someone tied my hand and I'm literally having an outer body experience every day. I'm looking at it. And also, I'm going through a very abusive marriage. And that's
Mm.
also created a lot of confusion, because how can a man be abused? How can I be so confident in my corporate world, and doing all these things, and people see me as a in the community, in the society, be very confident and doing stuff? How can he be abused? How can he
Hmm.
be gaslighted? So there
Right.
was a lot
Doesn't
of
make
that.
sense.
Nope. And
Right.
there was a lot of that confusion that came up with. And when I reached out to my then friends and then community, who I thought can help me and my family, everyone just had one word for me: man up.
Mm.
This is how it is for us, but and my question was, how, why is it? So that
Right.
why kind of led me to the rabbit hole. I'm an engineer by profession, so that's what I do. If
Okay.
something gets in my way, I try to find a solution. And I
Right.
always say this to my kids too: every problem has a solution. You
Hmm.
just need to find it. And that led me to research. That led me to talking to different scientists, different professors of different universities. And around COVID time frame came, and I was finishing up my divorce.
Hmm.
And I was like head on straight, like, trying to find what are the reasons that we are going through this, like no one's talking about it. And once I started opening the can of worms, and I was surprised to see and hear that I was not the only one.
Right.
There were boys and men that were abused, and there were boys and men that were living in a bubble and not
Hmm.
sharing because of the again, society's norm and culture of being shunned
Right.
and being perceived as weak. And what really propelled me is when I started reading the statistics.
Hmm.
70%, 76% of global suicides are committed by men.
Wow.
uh, and that just, I mean, even if I, when I say it, like, I literally get chills every time I use
Yeah.
that for all my speaking engagements. And I'm like, I was very close to be part of the statistics, by the way.
Right.
I'm a suicide survivor. In
Hmm.
2018, I really didn't have any other way. I was like, okay, so I don't know what's my purpose is at this point. My son
Sure.
was taken away from me for in a very abusive way, and I was heavily drinking. And of course, there was a reason for that, and I didn't have a chance to fight. So there was a lot of that created that confusion. So I lived in that for a few
Hmm.
months, and so looking back, that was really was the final, like, line for me
Hmm.
to, like, I cannot leave my son in this,
Right.
if not any for anyone else, at least for my son.
Right.
And that's how it really started. It started in a very just about making me better, and how can
Hmm.
I help my family line, and how can I help my son.
Right.
And before you know it, I started my podcast, Dads and Deadlifts, and I started interviewing different people. And that's when I came to know about, you know uh, got into much more internal and much more in depth about domestic violence. And
Hmm.
then also another statistics that's very, very like revealing to me. And one night I was just going through that, and I was like, not a single shooting that happened in the United States are committed by women. No one talks about that.
Hmm.
Everyone is ready to be like, okay, we have to this have this control, that control. Okay, fine, go for it. But when are we really start talking about the mental health of that person?
Right.
I'm not saying the horrendous crime they have committed is to be
Right.
looked away from, but
Of
I
course.
think we need to, if we really want a solution for future, we need to start digging deeper.
Hmm.
As a society, we
Agreed.
need to start proactively looking for it. Like, okay, so what caused this guy? And
Hmm.
probably we will find, like, it's not even that guy's. It's actually the generation before that that
Right.
had been taught, that had been, like, in a way, taught and then passed upon.
Hmm.
And this is how we are, and no one talks about it. Most of these shooters are either basically labeled as mentally ill.
Right.
So why is that mentally ill? Where is
Right.
that
Where's that coming from?
line? Where is that coming from? So that why needs to be asked.
Hmm.
So that's when I really started thinking about writing a book about
Hmm.
understanding, like, okay, so what kind of legacy I want to leave. And not just in podcast, I'm interviewing and bringing up people's stories, but how am I healing? What are the ways that I can kind of reel back and start doing the right thing and see where I'm at.
Hmm.
And as I wrote in my book, like, it's a healing journey is like a wild horse. It's an ongoing thing.
Yes, it
It will
is.
never be healed, and
Right.
especially when you go through abuse and a lot of these surviving, it's never a straight line and it's never
Hmm.
will go away. It's just
Right.
how you can regulate and manage that. uh,
Sure.
and that's really the book is about, how there are different tools we can have to
Hmm.
understand, if need be, how we can fall back on and really keep a track of your life. Start taking more inventory of your life and process every day, from a standpoint of what and how am I spending my day and who am I spending my day with.
Right.
So that became a big event in my life because community became everything for me, because
Hmm.
that saved my life. And as a part of, so for me, it was a CrossFit community.
Oh, the
And
CrossFit community.
CrossFit
Okay.
community, yes. And
Hmm.
walking into a CrossFit gym during my troubled times changed the complete narrative for me, when I saw that people I didn't even know were cheering for me.
Hmm.
And I found a purpose. I'm like, wow, I mean, here, people who knows me are, you know, against me. But these strangers who I don't know are here for, like, just cheering me on to finish my workout.
Sure. Hmm.
And that kind of opened my eyes that, okay, then that went to what are my values. Let's really start aligning myself with people who have the same values as me. And
Yes.
that's when I lost a lot of family members. That's when I lost a lot
Mm.
of my so-called friends that I had, because
Hmm.
when I started taking inventory, I realized, like, I need to let go of a lot of things.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm still in that circle.
Hmm.
And if your circle is not improving, it's not a circle, it's a cage. And
Oh, wow. That's a
you know
very interesting way to put things.
it is, because
Yeah.
if everyone is telling you to go back and man up,
Hmm.
and it's okay to have another drink when I am already addicted to drinking,
Right.
it becomes a cycle. And
Hmm.
you're not there's no way out of that unless and until
Right.
you break that, and you break that circle and come out of it and start finding a new circle of friends and start building your own community that aligns with your value, that aligns with your hard work,
Hmm.
and that will be there for you if you fail, and that will be there for you, and really cheering your change. And that's really what the mission became, to a point where we all need to, at one point, understand that not everything in the society that we automatically follow
Hmm.
doesn't hold true anymore. Back in the
Right.
day, probably, when men were hunters and women were gatherers, yes, we had to go out there and fight. The toughest men would be the head honcho of the community, or the and men, and women just would be there for family purpose or for gathering, all that. But we are past that stage. and
Hmm.
and having said that, under one breath, I also mentioned that Me Too movement is an amazing thing, and I always support that. And
Sure.
I am a big supporter of that. Only my only issue with that is, rightfully so, women needed this
Hmm.
for their rights. But
Right.
what we are missing out here is, in the Me Too movement, there are no clause to help the men. There
Sure.
are always that shunning, like, hey, this is what they did. But not all men did that wrong. So we are
Right.
putting everyone in one bucket for our past generations' mistakes, or
Yeah.
however they handled everything.
Hmm.
So there has to be a middle ground where boys and men also needs to be trained in a way, because
Hmm.
we do. I mean, like, by default, we are so wired to say, I'm fine, it's okay.
Right.
We don't
Right.
think too much about it, where a
Right.
woman will actually open up with her friends.
Yes, women are, like you said, conditioned and allowed to be more emotional and or sensitive, depending upon the family. I mean, there are some
Right.
women for sure that
Oh,
are
yes.
conditioned in a way kind of too. Like you're not allowed to share your feelings. You're shut down in a way that doesn't allow for your individuality or allow for you to be different than maybe your parents, right?
Right.
But I would agree 100% that for a man, it's just way harder, like way harder. I think about like my own children. I have two boys, one who is 32 and one who's 22. And I guess, I'm just curious. Like, I have one that's probably more reserved. My older one is like more reserved. My younger one is probably less reserved, more emotional, more sensitive. And I think to myself, was that a difference in maybe the way I mothered those two? I mean, they're 10 years apart. Or was it a difference in they had two different fathers? Was it a difference in their fathers and the way their fathers brought them up?
I think
Right?
like that's a very very good actually viewpoint, because I myself is married to a woman, and we are a blended family now.
Mm-hmm.
So my son from my previous marriage is 6 years old,
Okay.
and when I met my current wife, her son is now about to turn a teen, like 13 years old.
Okay. Okay.
And what I realize that when you have an absent father in your life,
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult for that kid to learn a certain patterns of behavior that are healthy from a
Mm-hmm.
masculine standpoint.
Right.
And we live in a society, and I forgot the percentage of it. I was reading this in an article by National Health Institute, that they have done this study that a certain percentage of these young boys are raised by single mothers.
Mm-hmm.
So they are only learning extreme emotions. One, they're either turning into complete on the opposite side with a lot of hatred and a lot of sadness, anger that turn into bitterness, that why my father is not present in my life. And they're
Mm-hmm.
taking it in a completely different way into addiction, mental health, and anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then the
Mm-hmm.
other side of is it's too soft. They're way too soft because they are nurtured by a woman.
Right.
Nothing wrong about that. But
Mm-hmm.
if you take one aspect and completely cut it off, you are basically not giving, it's not a full holistic way of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
A boy needs his father, end of story, because they have found that when a man plays with his son versus
Mm-hmm.
when a woman plays with her son,
Right.
the dopamine level increase between the boy and the father is 150 times more when the boy plays with his mother.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
if that tells you something, because men who are responsible are wired to become a father, and there's a reason for it. If you really think and go back in the history, why do you think all these kings and they have so many wives? The idea of continuing the lineage is imbibed in men.
Mm-hmm.
They are born to be fathers.
Right.
They know that whether they accept it or not.
Right.
Now we are not living in those world. Now we are living in a society where you have a choice. So someone walks out of being a father.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now they probably are in a situation where they don't know what to do. And rightfully so. The reason I found this out is because I also felt useless for 9 months after my son was born. I'm
Sure.
like, okay, my job is just to pick him up and give him to his mother. Like, what's my role in it?
Right. Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
no one tells us about it. No one
Mm-hmm.
talks about it. There's a couple of fathers classes of changing diapers and bibs, and that's about it. No one really, there are classes for women, for breath work, for how you can take care of yourself after pregnancy, after giving birth. There's not a single class. Even if
Right.
there is, there's not many showing up. Not many people showing up, so they are anyway stopping the funding.
Mm-hmm.
So all these small things you can see around us that are contributing to where we are right now. So it's not like one singular problem. It's just like a multiple small things that have led to this. And if we don't arrest this right now, our next generation is already going through a big transition,
Oh yeah,
right? They
definitely.
are into a society of artificial intelligence, machine
Mm-hmm.
learning, screen,
Right.
social media, where it's very easy to type and pretend someone that they're not, and they're
Right.
comparing themselves.
Yes.
So if you do not have the strength, if you do not have that strength of regulation of emotions, one way or the other, you will fall into that trap. Either way, either you're going to be completely bitter and anger and act out, or
Mm-hmm.
either you'll be too soft to even handle life's pressure. So
Right.
that's where we are at.
Yeah. So let's just talk a minute because, like, I just think about all of the 20 and 30-year olds, maybe, that are out there right now that are either new fathers or, newly married or navigating love and all of that. These are conversations I have for sure with my younger one. He seems to be a little bit more interested in, mom, how do I be healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my older one's just a little bit more independent and just not, I guess it's probably that man up
Mm-hmm.
mentality that he has. He definitely had a very man up father. Tough guy, just, no crying, suck it up, that kind of a mentality. And the younger one had kind of a different kind of father, a softer father. But I just think about like the 20 and 30-year olds that are coming up in our next generation. And if they hear this podcast, like, what can you share about what is the best way for them to start exploring? What does it mean to be a healthy but strong man that will be able to be the man that you're supposed to be the provider, be the strength, be the support, but also be that man in a marriage, in a relationship, and in a father experience that has the compassion and the empathy and the softness and the ability to talk about like feelings. Like, how do we help them navigate this?
It's an amazing question because I kind of mentioned that in my book too.
Mm-hmm.
First is unlearn, unlearn everything that you know. That's my message to everyone I talk to, because there are so many people out there, and and again, with due respect to our past generation, they didn't know better, so
Mm-hmm.
they will always give you a perspective based on their narrative and their belief system.
Right.
So if you go with that, you're gonna again be at the same end of the same pathway that they have followed. So first is unlearn. And by I really mean that in a very serious way. Like, you have to sit down and process it first. Like, everything about me, what are the truth? What is the real truth? We need to ask that
Yeah.
first.
And I just think about, like, someone my age in their 50s, 60s, right? That has learned, a man that has learned, like you said, no crying. Crying is weak. How do you unlearn that when every fiber of your being tells you you're weak if you start to cry or you start to feel like you want to cry?
It's not easy. It's not
Yeah.
easy, and that's exactly why this fight is will be a long battle. This is
Mm-hmm.
not just a mission that just because Rish is talking about it, or just because celebrities like Lewis Howes and everyone else is talking about it nowadays.
Sure.
But it's something that ingrained, and we have let that pass for so long that
Mm-hmm.
that is our culture,
Sure.
that is our way of living. So it's very difficult, and this is why that unlearn should be the number one. It's like a motto, like it's constantly, you have to repeat it until mantra, like finally it will hit you one day.
Mm-hmm.
And until then, it's just constantly, you have to repeat itself, like unlearn everything about, like, question everything, like, okay, why am I doing
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Like,
Why?
what is not, I guess you can start with maybe like what is not working,
Right. I mean, why
right?
is it, what is it serving me, or why is it not serving me? Okay, so I'm not supposed to cry. Okay, why is that?
Right.
What is it serving me? What purpose is it serving me? Okay, so I don't have anyone to talk to, so then I just go and make a glass of whiskey. I mean, whiskey on the rocks, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that becomes my numbness. Why am
Mm-hmm.
I doing this?
Right.
Those questions are hard at those moments, but those
Mm-hmm.
questions needs to be asked, because that those the answers lies in those questions, and we don't ask that. We don't take a pause, because everyone expects us around us to be that guy, starting from your mother, your sister,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or your spouse, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what they had seen too.
Sure.
Now, when you find the right spouse, when you find the right partner, the idea is to communicate to them, like, hey, listen, I mean, I need that safe space, I need that vulnerability. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a magic in that. You can learn from that, because that's another aspect of it. You can actually, if you have the right partner who
Mm-hmm.
really has the right best interest in mind, they can hold that safe space for you.
Right.
And that's when you can start learning. Until then, my best safe space is journal, journal, and journal. I wrote and I tore them up. I wrote and I tore them up, as if like all these thoughts are coming in my mind. I'm telling someone, and literally I'm just tearing those thoughts up and just throwing them out.
Mm-hmm.
That's really one of the good practice that I found until I created my community, where
Sure.
I have men around me. I know for a fact that I can reach out and talk anytime I want. And it's hard for them also to hold that safe space, but because it's me, they understand, and I can actually reel them back in, and actually we can have that talk time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult. It's very difficult that we are still in a very infant stages of these discussions. And
Yeah. I just think about, I feel like one of the biggest blocks is just lack of awareness.
mhm,
Like, there are men operating like this because that's what they've been taught, but they have no awareness of the
mhm,
impact that they're having on the future generation. Like, I know of someone who's got two boys. He's a father, and he's a tough guy, and he's riding his kids, his boys, all the time, trying to make them tough. And one of his kids said, "Daddy doesn't love me," and so somewhere, and it's like, what has to happen to break that awareness, to for someone to wake up, a man, or his partner, or somebody within his community, to say, "Stop, let's look at this like differently."
it's funny you said that, because that's one of my thing I always do with my boys. So having before I go there, I want to kind of quickly touch base on this. Being tough on your kids on certain things are okay.
Mm-hmm.
They need to learn, like that giving up is not an option when you're trying to do something, especially in sports or in. So sometimes it's okay for a mindset, and
Mm-hmm.
I tell them a lot, like,
Mm-hmm.
doing hard things can be easy when your mind is in the right place. But having said that, when I push them, both my kids,
Mm-hmm.
um, I never fail to say something. And even on days like, I kind of, when I discipline them,
Mm-hmm.
I always make sure I use that word, I love you,
Mm-hmm.
and know that this is nothing changes that. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, you may feel that I'm being stern or I'm being
Mm-hmm.
harsh,
Right.
but right, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have more discussions to do, you can come and talk to me later,
Right.
but know that I love you. This doesn't change that.
Mm-hmm.
And both our kids, I always tell that nothing you will do will get you in trouble, and or will get you out of love from me or your mom.
Okay.
So these discussions, these assurance needs to happen a lot, especially with
Sure.
boys,
Mm-hmm.
because they automatically think that, oh, especially my son said the same thing. Sometimes I would be stern and he would turn like, Dada, you are being so harsh. And I'm like, I get that, but do you understand why I did it? So we will have that full conversation moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you cannot just leave it at that. You have to continue that conversation at some point and actually end it, so that
Mm-hmm.
they know that, okay, I still have Dara's love. I mean, that's what
Sure.
my sons call me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some things that are boundaries. There's some things that are needed
Mm-hmm.
to be that guy, because that's where I talk about. There's a difference between how you raise boys. There's a nurture, and there's also nature. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to also let them bring out their nature, how they are, but
Mm-hmm.
in a very controlled environment now, and help them nurture that. So then when they grow up to be a man, now you're looking at a man who knows how to protect his family in times of need,
Mm-hmm.
and who will also have that other side of it, compassion and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I read this, and I tell this to my sons all the time. I read this quote, I don't know from whom, that heroes and villains are, their stories are the same.
Hmm.
The villain only decided that world hurt me and I will hurt them back. Now, a hero
Okay.
decided the world hurt me, that I will not let them hurt anyone else.
Mm.
So the
Hmm.
choice is ours.
Sure.
So I help them understand that, like, there's nothing wrong being tough, but define the definition of toughness to them.
Sure.
That's the first thing they need to understand. There's
Hmm.
certain situations you got to be tough. Absolutely, 100%. Don't give up on certain things you're pursuing. Don't give up on your dreams. Do the hard work.
Sure.
But those things needs to be defined,
Hmm.
because right now no one have told us what do you mean I need to be tough. I was in a soccer team forever, and
Right.
I know for a fact there are so many times I didn't even tell my coach that I shouldn't be playing that game because I was nursing an injury, in fear of I will be looked down upon as a not a very good athlete.
Right. Right.
So same thing happens till now in colleges, college basketball, college football, in NFL, and anywhere you take a look at this.
Hmm.
And people have spoken up about that. So if that tells you something, like how we are so used to hiding things when we want to speak up.
Right. So I'm like a really firm believer in the power of threes, especially when it comes to tackling something that is big, right, and can feel overwhelming about like where do I start, right? If we were to just look at this idea, let's say someone comes to a place of awareness of like, okay, I know I got to make some changes. Like I
Mhm.
know that there's growth for me as a man, right? What are the three things that you feel like are the best things for them to focus on in their growth?
So in their growth, the first thing, and I'm gonna take your power of three and make it power of four. The reason is I wrote it in my book because that actually helped me.
Okay.
I call it calm, CALM, calm method. The reason I came up with that idea, because every time all I heard is calm down, it's okay, calm down, it's okay. And
Okay.
I'm like, and I play with words. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give this calm a meaning, a better meaning than just
Hmm.
calm down and shut your mouth.
Right.
Um, so the way I came up with this is, first you gotta communicate.
Hmm.
You don't have to worry about who do you find. You have to communicate to yourself. Start with
Hmm.
that. Write
Okay.
it down, because that, we do communicate million thoughts throughout the day.
Sure. Hmm.
So no one is going to know this. No one's gonna shunning you. No one's doing anything, because it's just you versus you.
Hmm.
Look up in the mirror at night, or the way I used to do it is I would turn on my camera and just talk to me. Like, hey, I'm feeling not very good about this, and
Hmm.
I feel like crying, and I would look at those videos later.
Mm.
Or some days, I'll be honest, Laurie, like some days I just kept looking at me, didn't say anything. And next thing you know, after 2, 3 minutes, tears are rolling down my eyes.
Mm. Right. Yeah.
So that's the first thing, communicate. You don't need to necessarily find other person to communicate. You need to start communicating to yourself first,
Hmm.
because that's when the awareness happens. That's when until and unless you are literally living in an autopilot.
Right. Right.
Then comes analyze. That you have to analyze that problem, or analyze that specific thing, like, okay, so what is really that's bothering me? Let's
Hmm.
write it down in steps. Let's
Hmm.
really write down all the steps that are bothering me in this whole process, right? And that can be, I don't know, like, okay, my kids don't love me, and why is that? You have to
Yeah. My
start
wife's my
analyzing it.
wife's mad at me all the
Yeah, why
time.
is that?
I'm
Like, start
drinking too
writing them down.
much. Yeah. Hmm.
Pick a problem, one problem at a time,
Sure.
and start writing down the overall gist. And then L is lean in. Now have that problem that you analyzed it and really lean into it. The meaning is really break it down by steps, that what are my pain points in this
Hmm.
if I want to improve, and what can be my obstacles in this. Those are small steps that you will start finding in it. Like, okay, maybe I work too long hours, too many hours. Maybe I'm too focused on my phone. Maybe I'm too focused on my career, and I'm not paying attention that, hey, I only have few more 18 summers, really, if you think about it, with our
Right.
kids. 18 summers if you break it down.
Yeah. And,
No one thinks about it.
something that came up for me as you were talking about leaning in, that reminds me of an energy coach that I have worked with. And one of the things that she talks about, that reminds me of leaning in, is whenever you have something that is not working the way you want it to, you can't lose the weight, you're drinking too much, or this or whatever. One of the most important things that you can do is to stop judging it
Mm-hmm.
and just accept that this is what it is. And that kind of reminds me of like leaning in. Okay,
Exactly.
so this is what's going on. You know, my wife is mad at me. My kids don't, think I don't love them. I'm drinking too much. This is what it is. Don't judge it. Just lean into it. Is that what you
Absolutely.
mean by leaning in?
Absolutely, 100%. Because in my book, I actually broke it down in much more detail. That, say,
Mm-hmm.
for example, you need to sit with that negative thought.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
actually, I have a mantra I wrote, and anyone can twist it the way they like it. But I basically would sit down. I will take some time and really in a meditation way, and I will just talk to my negative thoughts. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you were here.
Right.
I'm choosing to let you go. Thanks for serving me. But
Mm-hmm.
right now, I'm choosing a different path
Sure.
because you cannot be judging your negative character so much that you are focused on it. And as Tony Robbins says, where focus goes, energy flows. At
Mm-hmm.
some point, you have to let that go.
Right.
And that's when you can have that space for more, right? That the
Yes.
newness.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do the same thing repeatedly until the day you feel like it can take 6 months, it can take 6 weeks, it can take 6 days, depending on the issues that you're
Mm-hmm.
talking. But you
Yeah.
have to keep talking. You cannot avoid it. And that's where the thing is. You have to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually welcome the positive. Like, hey, I am not sure. I'm unsure of what this positive path looks like, because that's exactly means you are going on a different path. Because if you know your
Mm-hmm.
end goal, trust me, you're not going in a new route. That means you're again following the same route because your answer is already there.
Right.
If you're following a
Exactly.
new route, you won't have an answer. It's okay.
Exactly.
Being unsure is your path.
Yes. And people, that is probably one area, myself included, that it's very difficult to sit in the unknown.
Hmm. I
You
love
know,
that.
just
I am a big I have to a point like now, anything unknown, I always say yes. Anything unknown.
I
I
like that.
love that because uncertainty makes me thrive, literally, because I had
Okay.
seen that gives me a new perspective that makes me much better learner and
Mm-hmm.
open my eyes to much broader things, and it always helped me. And then of course the choice is on me if it's actually going in a bad way or in a good way. So of course you will still have that choice, but until and unless you go that unknown route, you never going to explore that path. It's period. And then the last one is mitigate out of calm, is that then you kind of write down those small steps. And I have
Mm-hmm.
this chart that I've created, priority and ease, like which are those, all these steps, which are the easiest and which are the top priority. So you graph it,
Yeah. Right.
and then you take the easiest one with the highest priority.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So everything has its numbers, and I kind of talk about in that book too, that, and then basically start working on those one small step at a time. It's, you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
work on the whole problem today, but just one thing at a time. So that can be, hey, you know what, I just need to be much more aware when my urge to drink starts.
Mm-hmm.
When
Okay.
does it start? Okay, it starts in the
What's
evening.
going on?
Okay, what triggers it? Oh, when
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact when I'm about to have a fight with my partner or have this and that, when I get stressed. Okay,
Right.
now step back. What can you do then?
Right.
You know it's coming. Let's prep ourselves. Now, this time I will not do that.
Mm-hmm.
What can I go for? Maybe you choose go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
You choose for a quick run.
Mm-hmm.
And I will force myself because I'm like, I can always drink later. Let's go for a run. Our body works amazingly. When you start moving,
Uh-huh.
your dopamine level increases.
Right.
And you will not feel after a good sweaty
It's
workout.
like, oh, yeah, okay, I think I'll have a nice whiskey on the rocks to cool down.
Now, you would feel like, I need water.
Exactly.
And then tell yourself again, you gotta go back, and it's a cycle. Then you gotta communicate again to yourself, like, oh, I actually didn't need that today. So maybe this is my path. So
Mm-hmm.
again, that creates another sub path. So it's a cycle. You have to start doing that. Communicate, you have to analyze, you have to lean in, which is, as you said, is acceptance and sitting with those problems, not running away, because that's where the biggest problem I think men has. They admitting that I have a problem,
Sure. Right.
because again it comes from ego.
And admitting that I have a problem that I'm having a challenge solving on my own.
Yep, that's
Because
one of the
men
biggest
men
thing we do
think that
not.
they should be able to solve all problems on their own. So how do you carry out your mission? Like, how do you help these men? Like, I know you have your podcast,
Hmm.
which I'm sure is very helpful to listen to. Like, any other ways that you support men in finding a community that can put them on this path?
Yeah, so I think for me, I took a different approach. I don't
Okay.
market myself as guru or teacher. I'm very adamant about that, and that's why my
Okay.
intro is will always be short. I really honestly believe, and I wrote that in my book too, is that everyone is their own teacher and their student.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you cannot teach anyone unless and
Okay.
until, especially boys and men. So you have to give them that space. You have to give them the time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that bonds us is always movement.
Mm.
So I'm big. The way I create my community is movement. Let's go create a running group.
Sure.
Let's a
Mm-hmm.
walking group.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do sauna and ice bath together, doing really hard things.
Yes.
And that challenges the men love challenges.
I like that.
Yoga and meditation doesn't work for us. If you want to entice men in a seminar
Mm-hmm.
to change themselves, challenge them.
Sure.
Challenge them to do better, challenge them to
Mm-hmm.
do the hard work. Trust me,
Mm-hmm.
there will be 10 men trying to prove themselves, and
Yeah.
that's when it starts. But while doing that, then you actually reel them in and help them understand that because they can do these hard things, they can also do the biggest hard thing, to letting go of
Yeah.
that ego.
I love it.
So
I love
that's
it.
really how I pursue it. I always, like, even with my kids, I always
Mm-hmm.
pushing them for workout, and help them understand it's okay to talk. If you
Yeah.
can do these, it's okay to talk.
It's so true. I mean, when I look back, at like my boys and raising my boys, like doing things with them was always a way to get them to talk.
Hmm.
Like just to sit and let's talk. You want to talk to mom and no, but like if we were going to be out and doing things, playing, baseball in the backyard or whatever, like it's amazing like how conversations will come up.
Oh, absolutely, 100%,
Yeah.
100%.
That's cool. So, one of the things you said at the very beginning is that your mojo or your superpower is vulnerability.
Hmm.
How do you like maintain that? Because I know, like in your line of work and just in carrying out your mission, like that is so important. How do you protect that and maintain that so that you can carry out your mission?
I think you have to live your truth. There's a lot of like, I have seen people who thinks they're vulnerable, but all they're doing is trauma dumping.
Okay.
They just wants attention, and that's not what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is actually living your truth. Like, hey, I'm not a victim here.
Mm-hmm.
I am stating these as facts,
Mm-hmm.
and I am still learning. I'm still growing, and I will make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. But here's what I learned so far, and here's what I am. The reason I am stating my story to you is because maybe it will turn on that light switch for you.
Right. Right.
And that's what vulnerability is. That's what it does. When you start talking, trust me, in a room full of men, like, no one will talk. No one will be like, okay, whatever, man. But then that one person, it takes a while,
Right.
but someone will be like, well, and that's the magic.
When you
Once
start that
one
conversation.
one person starts that conversation, well, and then next thing you know, the whole brotherhood
Right.
becomes like, okay, yep, yeah, I went through this too. And then my question to everyone would be like, how many people have gone through the same thing?
Right.
And it's a very simple thing. Like, I will ask some very simple thing, like, you got hurt, and you really got hurt, you didn't want to
Hmm.
tell anyone, everyone's hands would go up.
Right. It
You want to
helps them
connect.
see that you're not alone in all
So
this.
then you
Like,
have to champion there, right? Like, because the
right.
moment they raise their hand, then you say, look, So you just proved yourself you can be vulnerable. So now
Right.
let's take a deeper look at. And
Yeah.
that's how you start.
Yeah. I love that. Like the work you're doing is so, so important in this world. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your courage, your braveness, your vulnerability. Yeah, just thank you for everything.
You're
And of course,
welcome.
thank you for being a guest on the show.
Yes, absolutely. I love what I do, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to always raise awareness and talk. Like I don't, as I said, I don't believe in marketing and talk too much about this and that. I live my life. I live, and then create a community. And I have surrounded myself with the right people, and I'm very fortunate about that. And I'm very mindful about where my energy goes. And just even one person that comes in my contact, I just try to leave them with something.
Right.
It's not about coaching, or I don't actually coach people. I don't actually like do
Hmm.
any seminars or webinars. It's very simple. If anything, we all need to do is start talking.
Yeah. Well, as a marketing expert myself, I can say that building a community and walking your truth is a form of marketing. And so you're doing it well.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.